Welcome to the Records and Information Management Symposium 2021. It is good to have you all sharing with us in this wonderful occasion as we commemorate Records and Information Management Month. We invite you all to stand at attention as we now listen to the national anthem. Thank you. To the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education, Youth and Information, Dr. Grace McLean, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, to all the members of the executive management team of this ministry, Mrs. Claudette Thomas, the government archivist, all national archivists across the region, presenters, session moderators, RIM practitioners across the public sector here in Jamaica and across the Caribbean region, members of the Jamaica Archives and Records Department, team, ladies and gentlemen, pleasant good morning to you. It is really a pleasure for us to be here to have a discourse on the issues impacting the country at this time and the region. We have an opportunity to engage with practitioners today around these varying issues so that we can develop strategies, discuss areas of collaboration to make our countries and the region much more productive, effective in the carrying out of the business of government. At this time, we will ask Mrs. Raquel Strawn-Inerarty to offer prayer.
Good morning. Let us pray. Our most righteous and eternal Father, who art in heaven, holy is your name, O Lord. Heavenly Father, we stand in awe of who you are, and we thank you for your love, grace, provision, and protection over this past year. We acknowledge that as we gather here this morning as records and information management practitioners, it is not by coincidence, but is in accordance with your divine will. We have been given the honor to work alongside policymakers to facilitate greater transparency and accountability in the creation, the maintenance, use, and disposition of records with the aim of informing our citizens, preserving our nation's documentary heritage, and contributing to the attainment of national goals. We ask that your presence be with us today as we share and learn together. And I pray that the knowledge and insights gained today will be used for the good of all. Jesus, I pray that everyone represented here will be blessed as we dedicate this symposium to you. And thank you for leading and guiding us with eager and open hearts. In your most precious name we pray, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mrs. Strawn-Inerarty, Senior Archivist in the Archives Unit, Spanish Town, and member of the RIM Month Planning Committee. For the official welcome and remarks, I now invite the government archivist, Mrs. Claudette Thomas, from the Jamaica Archives and Records Department and chair of the RIM Month Committee, to bring opening remarks. Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. Dwayne Cargill, moderator and acting principal director of the Information Division in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. The Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Presenters from Jamaica and across the region, Miss Sonia Black, Mrs. Margot Thomas, Miss Sparkle Ferrer, Mr. Emerson Bryan and Mr. Tim McGill, session moderators, members of the Jamaica Archives and Records Department, Records and Information Management professionals across Jamaica and across the Caribbean and the world, a pleasant morning. The Government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information and Jamaica Archives Records Department, is pleased to welcome all practitioners, all friends, all well-wishers to our second Records and Information Management Symposium. This year's RIM Month is utilized to promote RIM professionals and the importance of a structured record-keeping program. In the year 2018, via Cabinet Decision 2518, our government, the government of Jamaica, approved its Records and Information Management Policy, which outlined the government's framework for the proper handling of official records across the public sector. The importance of providing accurate guidance in the handling and preservation of official records is also highlighted and supported by the policy. The preservation of our archives is the remit of the Jamaica Archives and Records Department, which functions as the primary repository of the documentary heritage of Jamaica. As the chief institution for the government's RIM program, JARD spearheaded this year's RIM Month activities along with our stakeholders to explore, embrace the various elements of the records management process since April 8, 2021, under the theme Managing Records and Information for Posterity, Transparent, Accountable, and Inclusive. The series of activities in which you, our stakeholders, have been engaged are our RIM Implementation Quarterly Review Session, a media launch, training of trainers, and today we proceed with the RIM Symposium. Today's event promises to be very engaging and informative, as local, regional, and international stakeholders will inspire and stimulate us as we investigate developing trends and sound or good RIM-related practices as we strive to support effective and efficient public sector service delivery. So, I'd like to once again extend a very warm welcome to all and encourage you to have an open mind as we seek to engage, explore, and gives consideration for further development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas, for those remarks and for your welcome. I hope everyone on the various platforms is feeling welcome. I want to thank you, Mrs. Thomas, certainly, and the planning committee for having planned such an exciting symposium. Today we are looking forward to an engaging discussion. We do hope that everyone will leave with some kind of plan of action in order to improve or to enhance the records and information management framework and practices within your own ministries, departments, and agency, or whichever sector that you work. I'm excited to hear what our minister have to charge us with this morning. But before the minister present to us, I will invite Mr. Michael Wilson to offer a musical rendition. Let us put our hands together for Mr. Wilson. Wow, Mr. Wilson, that was a scintillating performance rendition. I'm happy that the viewers were not able to see me or my colleagues from the Jamaica Information Service who were here. It was a sight to behold. I'm sorry that you can't see us, but just to advise you, those of you who are watching us on Facebook, that we are streaming on Facebook.com. MOEYI Jamaica. We are also on YouTube at MOE Jamaica. I want you all to use the hashtag RIM Symposium, hashtag RIM Matters, because we want the world to know, we want Jamaicans to know that records and information matters, and without RIM or effective records management, then certainly we cannot provide efficient and effective service to our citizens. At this time, I just want to remind you again of the theme for Records and Information Management Month. It's Managing Records and Information for Posterity, Transparent, Accountable, and Inclusive. And so as we manage our records, let's remember that we are doing so with a view of being transparent, being accountable, and being inclusive. At this time, we will hear from the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education, Youth and Information, to give the keynote address and to declare this RIM Symposium open.
Mr. Dwayne Cargill, Moderator and Acting Director of Information Division at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Mrs. Claudette Thomas, Government Archivist. Presenters, local and from across the region, Ms. Sonia Black, Jamaica Adjunct Lecturer, UWI Mona, Mrs. Margot Thomas, National Archivist of St. Lucia, Mrs. Sparkle Ferreira, Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Emerson Bryan, Barbados, Mr. Tim McGill, Canada, session moderators, team, Jard, good morning. The Government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, is pleased to participate in the second symposium in celebration of Records and Information Management Month 2021 under the theme, Managing Records and Information for Posterity, Transparent, Accountable, and Inclusive. We share the view that recorded information is the foundation of any institution's ability to fulfill its responsibilities. It allows strong governance and accountability, yielding confidence in decision-making and sustainability. Jamaica submitted its revised National Determined Contribution on June 30, 2020, making us one of only 18 other countries in the world to have done so to date. This demonstrates our commitment to environment management. We also continue to monitor and implement programs towards Destination 2030 and our achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our fiduciary and regulatory responsibilities expose several opportunities influenced by the Internet of Things. We have established several protocols and policies to strengthen public-private partnerships, stabilize our economy, and strengthen our education system, among others. While I can communicate our wins, I must also recognize the threats and opportunities underpinned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Colleagues, we classify this period and subsequent engagement the new normal, of which I encourage you all to remain resolute and undaunted by the changes in how we operate. I encourage the team of information professionals, friends, and other stakeholders to treat with urgency a resolution to reinforce information as an asset. It is this asset that, when carefully packaged, results in developing legacies for generations to come. Without reliable, verifiable, authentic records, decisions, actions, and transactions cannot be traced. Additionally, rules would not be known and cannot be enforced. Transparency would not exist, and nobody would be held to account for his or her actions. Records, as mentioned, are the indispensable foundation of the governance process because without reliable and authentic documentary evidence guiding all essential government process, governance, peace, justice, and strong institutions cannot be achieved. According to the World Bank blog of May 26, 2020, governments have been trying to ensure continuity during the coronavirus pandemic with varying results. Like governments the world over, we aim to develop and improve our digital services as a response to the COVID-19 emergency. Nation building and security of memory institutions. As a government, we appreciate the role played by records and archival institutions such as the National Archives of Barbados, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica Archives and Records Department in preserving and making accessible records or documents of permanent value. Such records are found to be useful for problem solving, decision making in education, government and industries, and also in the protection of the rights of citizens. The government of Jamaica supports inclusive governance where all groups in society are given the same opportunity to improve and maintain their well-being. Whether the privileged or underprivileged, the able-bodied or the disabled, significantly resourced or less resourced citizens, regardless of age, gender, or creed, all are planned for and treated equally. There's a great need for the services of these entities to be more far-reaching, especially in this digital age. We call on you, our records and information practitioners, to recommend systems which will maintain the integrity of the records in your custody from creation to disposition, while posing valuable solutions to which will serve the unique needs of our citizens. We call on you, our records and information practitioners, to recommend systems which will maintain the integrity of the records in your custody from creation to disposition, while posing valuable solutions to which will serve the unique needs of our citizenry. Since government cannot function effectively without having appropriate documentary information resources available at their disposal, it is important that guidelines be found that will provide direction for the development of society. Within this context, the Government of Jamaica, via Cabinet Decision 25-18, approved a new GOJ RIM policy. This RIM policy provides the guiding principles and framework for all MDAs in the implementation of RIM. It also seeks to promote the accessibility and timely sharing of information within and across government while protecting confidential information. The policy is based on and is aligned to the International Records Management Standard, ISO 15489. Today's symposium is planned with a view to continuing the thrust towards good and effective governance and the constant provision of reliable documentary evidence, thereby securing national archives across the region. I charge all of you who are assembled on this platform, therefore, to explore, unravel, dissect, and analyze each concept which will emerge from today's conversation, including the benefits of records and information management in the hybrid environment, public records not being necessary for all public eyes, strategies to identify RIM risks in government entities, knowledge management, application of GARP to eRIM and legislations and regulations governing the management of records in today's digital experiences. We as government of the region are looking to you to provide solid recommendations which can be taken forward to enhance the transformation thrust, to enhance citizen-centric services to the people of the region. Having outlined our theme, I now declare the second JARD Symposium open.
Our RIM Symposium has been declared open, but the Minister have given us a charge. Records and information management helps with the protection of rights. and it helps to ensure that persons' rights are protected, because the only way we can protect rights are when we are aware of the information, when people have the information to make decisions, to develop programs, and to develop policies that meet the rights of those our citizens. The minister have also asked us to, in our deliberations today, to recommend systems that will maintain the integrity of records. It is important that in our management of records we ensure the integrity, authenticity of the records in order for us to be aware that those records are indeed complete. As the minister spoke about the areas for discussions today, my thought went to the area on whether or not public records should be necessary for all public eyes. That is something that I am certainly looking forward to hearing the discussion on today, because there are a lot of discussions about accountability and about access to information. And records management does, of course, as the minister said, should allow for protection of people's rights, and we all have our right to privacy and so forth. So I'm looking forward to hearing the discussions certainly around this matter today. Having declared the RIM Symposium launch, the minister just now, I want to encourage everyone in the discussions today to be open, to be engaging, because it is not just about talking, but it's about coming up with recommendations and strategies that can allow and can help each of us and in our own ministries, departments, and agency across the region to be able to develop solutions to assist in enhancing our service delivery and ensuring that we're meeting the needs of the citizens to which we serve. At this time, I want to invite Mrs. Strawn Inerarty to give us some announcements. She will, of course, tell us about how the day's proceedings will flow. Mrs. Raquel Strawn Inerarty.
Thank you, Mr. Cargill. Good morning, presenters, participants, and colleagues. And again, welcome to the second staging of our RIM Symposium. As mentioned, my name is Raquel Strawn Inerarty, and I'm from the Jamaica Archives and Records Department. And today I will be the moderator for the first session of the symposium. So we have 3 sessions today. In each session, we have 2 presentations, followed by a question and answer segment where our presenters will respond to your questions. We're therefore inviting you to utilize the chat for your questions and comments, and we have members who will be monitoring the chat and will respond to you accordingly. So thank you for that. And having the minister announce the symposium open, I will begin this morning, and I have the privilege of introducing our first 2 presenters, Miss Sonia Black and Miss Margot Thomas. So I will first read the profile for Miss Black, and her presentation will follow, and then I will return with the profile for Mrs. Thomas, and then her presentation will follow after that. And then we will have our question and answer segment, followed by a musical interlude, and then we will proceed to our second session where we'll have another moderator. So at this time, it is really my privilege to introduce Miss Sonia Black, who is a consultant in the field of records and information management and an adjunct lecturer in the Department of Library and Information Studies at the University of the West Indies, Mona. She sits on the Records Committee of several public sector entities. She has also chaired several national records and information management standards lead groups and was a technical secretary of the industry group adopting the ISO 15489 standard for Jamaica. Ms. Black is a member of the ARMA International Group, the International Council on Archives, and the Carbica, which is a branch of the International Council on Archives in the Caribbean, and has presented several conferences locally and internationally. She believes in community service and is a soroptimist who advocates for women and champions issues affecting women and girls. She's the mother of 3 and has 2 grandchildren. In her spare time, she bakes and is an avid reader. I now introduce to you Ms. Sonia Black.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here with you all and sharing in this symposium in honor of Records and Information Management Month. Having been tasked with addressing the topic, the benefits of RIM in a hybrid environment, I would like to focus our attention in the brief time available to these objectives. 1, to provide a brief overview of RIM in the Caribbean. 2, to explore the most often advocated benefits in the RIM literature. 3, to question, why have RIM programs not flourished despite the centrality of records in the information age? 4, to turn the spotlight on records, RIM, and the practitioners. And lastly, to identify ways of valuing what we do. In looking at the overview of records and information management in the Caribbean, there are some common features, including the legacy of our shared colonial heritage, characterized by the registry system in the English-speaking Caribbean. Post-independence or other forms of self-governance, there has been a difficulty in modernizing our record-keeping systems, moving them from a reactive reporting control function towards a more proactive analytical decision support system. That is not to say that there hasn't been improvements here and there, driven largely by the 20th century influences of technology and globalization. There are pockets of excellence in developing RIM programs. However, I would say our RIM activities have been disjointed and RIM has not been integrated into the automation initiatives of our organizations. We face the challenges of existing in hybrid environments where information silos abound. So as we consider the benefits of records and information management, I believe I'm speaking to the choir here, and we should not be surprised that a Google search returns over 8 million hits. This is something that is an ongoing and oft-repeated discussion in the literature. If I were to take a poll of the audience here, I would hear echoes of words such as vital, critical, lifeblood of the organization, saves time and money, etc., etc. The best response to the question, and again in my opinion, is still the 10 business reasons by Robeck, Brown, and Stevens. And these are, I will itemize them: to control the creation and growth of records, to reduce operating costs, to improve efficiency and productivity, to assimilate new records management technologies, to ensure regulatory compliance, to minimize litigation risks, to safeguard vital information, to support better management decision-making, to preserve the corporate memory, and to foster professionalism in running the business. Now, it is one thing to reel off these benefits But can we truly say how records and information management can realize these benefits? And how can we demonstrate this within our organizations? I will ask as well, if RIM provides these benefits, why have the RIM function in our various organizations not flourished? As RIM practitioners, we have to ask ourselves some serious questions. Is it a matter of marketing? Is it lack of training? Is it that we don't know how to speak the language of success? Is it a lack of understanding of the technology? Or is it that we are selling a product that we cannot back up? Another thing that we are quite vocal in emphasizing is that records and information is an asset. And this is largely accepted. However, unlike other assets, by accounting standards, it has not been monetized. It's very difficult for us to say with any certainty what is the value of the information that we manage. Here are some interesting quotes on valuing information from industry leaders. We have better accounting functions of the toilets in the building than our information. We can't manage what you don't measure. How do you quantify the value of information? Can we apply well-established asset management principles and practices to managing the newly anointed information assets? As records practitioners, I want us to consider that even if we make some headway in valuing information and records, we still have a bigger challenge in that whilst organizations may place value on records, they may still not place much value on records management or what we bring to the table as practitioners. And that is something that is of great concern because there are many organizations that do not employ or have no position for a records manager. There are organizations that records seem to be there, but nobody responsible. And they're existing there. And a number of private sector companies, they are making a lot of money. So what are they missing? Cindy Zuvik, writing on how to prove the value of RIM, posits that one of the main challenges is the inability to quantify the return on investment in hard costs and cost savings. RIM is seen as an operational expense line item that can only improve the bottom line by reducing expenses. Also, any cost saving gained are usually realized through cost avoidance, which is not a tangible amount that can be applied to an existing expense line item. These savings are typically not recognized until the cost is incurred through an unfortunate event. And since our job is to prevent some of these, we may be victims of our own success, ladies and gentlemen. Gartner offers a 6-point information valuation model, which is dependent on what your objective or purpose is for valuing information. 3 of these points are focused on the financial measures for information. They are the cost value of information, CVI. What would it cost if information was lost? The market value of information. What good could you get from selling or trading the information? And the economic value. How does the information contribute to your bottom line? The other 3 are what is called foundational measures, focused on improving information management disciplines. And these are the intrinsic value of information. That is, how complete, accurate, and unique is the information? The business value of information, how good or relevant is the information for specific purposes? Performance value of information, how does the information affect key business drivers? Now, whilst we may think that we should focus on the points that measures the information management discipline, we must also note that if we don't know the value of the information, and if the organization has not acknowledged the value of the information that they have, then they are not likely to support initiatives for managing that information. So we as practitioners must know the information that an organization, that our organization has, and what it is that we are managing. Another approach to valuing information is offered by Rick Medina, who looks at quantifying the return on investment or making the business case for content management solutions. Here I have modified it to address valuing or justifying RIM initiatives generally. In this methodology, we have 6 approaches. There's the top-down business case, highlighting macro-level RIM benefits organization-wide, possibly through strategic planning exercises, because here we get to step back and look at our function as a whole and how it relates and integrates with other business processes in the organization. Then there's the bottom-up business case, where we infiltrate business transformation initiatives and show how incorporating RIM in the process flow provides value added. There's also the reallocative business case, where we can demonstrate how cost savings from RIM initiatives can be used in another area. For example, when we make savings from implementing retention scheduling or digitization. The retrospective business case. This focuses on an historical event or scenario and analyzes how the outcome would have been different if proper RIM practices or proposed initiatives had been in place. And this can be challenging, I must admit, because of the fact that we handle confidential information, and to speak about some of the things that we know might be unethical or doing our organization a disservice. However, how we coach these past events and raise awareness for the difference RIM could make can still be done. Possibly by calculating man hours spent on searching for certain information. We all in our various organizations know that there are repeat searches, extensive research that we do on certain topics, some of them financial, or where the organization has had to make big payouts because the information could not be found. We are looking at situation now in the news where organization has been exposed for mismanagement of information. It's in the public domain, so we can quantify the effects and speak to how a different approach could have made it less risky. Then there's the embedded business case, and this is where we identify how RIM initiatives can be integrated into the automation of specific line of business. I want to refer here to what is a current initiative across government to automate, to a certain extent, the HR information. And I am not sure to what extent anybody thought to see where there might be some value added if records management criteria was built into this function? Lastly, there is the reformative business case. And this is where the structural business model related or highly strategic changes that require radical transformation of the business or the RIM function can be implemented to make significant changes. I have just touched the surface in the time available, and we can continue the conversation amongst ourselves. I would like to leave in summary though, a few points for you to take away. Records are assets that should be managed like other assets. The benefits of RIM can be substantial, but they are best realized through a well-organized program of activities. As practitioners, we must demonstrate the value that RIM brings to the organization with more quantifiable ways. The data on RIM outcomes can be collected internally, but we have to find ways, significant ways to measure these. And we can also use external benchmarks. As I have identified, there are models of assessment that we can adapt to demonstrate the value of records and information management and the return on investment that particular projects can realize. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I sincerely hope that you have grasped something from this conversation and that we will actively in our organizations see how we can be more analytical, more strategic, and that we can measure what it is that we do. Because without that, we will not be able to justify the value that we bring to our organization. Again, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, presenters and participants in this Jamaica Records and Information Symposium 2021. I am Margot Thomas, the National Archivist of St. Lucia, and I am honored to be part of this auspicious event. My paper is entitled Public Records, Not Necessarily for All Public Eyes. The National Archives Authority of St. Lucia Act, number 16 of 1993, deems a public record as, quote, any record in the custody of any ministry, department of government, or statutory body, unquote, and the record is, quote, any medium on which information is recorded, unquote. Over the last few years, government records are displayed on television by some talk show hosts as quote-unquote evidence and then posted on social media. There has been much speculation as to how the records are obtained. The individuals who publish public records on television and social media platforms either do not know, do not care, or fail to realize that, quote, confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the cornerstones of information security, as also protecting information from disclosure to those not permitted to see it, modification by those not permitted to change it, and disruption of legitimate use or access, unquote. And this is taken from Information Integrity, Are We There Yet? by Harley and Cooper. Placing government records in the public domain without permission is problematic. The citizens lose confidence in the government for failing to safeguard their information. Investors are fearful of the publication of the contracts and contacts that have been made with the government, especially where citizens view them suspiciously or as predators who come into the country to rape, scrape, and plunder, rather than bringing in much needed financial resources to aid the country, as in the case of the Cabot development at Capital State. This results in the proliferation of stories of corruption by government officials, which is blown out of proportion with each retelling, and the branding of government ministers as crooks who have become overnight multimillionaires. The individuals who disclose government records do so to boost their popularity ratings among the citizenry and to aid their political agenda. They may begin with bona fide documents, but as the stakes are raised, rumors persist that records are doctored and even created through the available technologies to score cheap political points. In first world countries such as the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, the United States of America, France, and Germany, the use of government records is governed by legislation, including archival legislation, freedom of information legislation, data protection and privacy laws, and various policies to establish the maintenance, safekeeping, and disposition of records. However, many islands of the Caribbean do not have archival legislation, and fewer still have freedom of information or data protection or privacy laws. For many years, government records of St. Lucia were managed by the Windward Islands Financial and Store Rules, a relic of our colonial past, together with the Public Records Ordinance number 38 of 1965 and the Destruction of Court Records Ordinance number 16 of 1936. These pieces of legislation were repealed with the promulgation of the National Archives Act in 1993. With the island attaining its independence in 1979, there was a thrust towards public sector reform. Several acts which dictate how government ministries, departments, and statutory institutions are established and run, and how their records are maintained and eventually disposed were promulgated. Some of these include the Public Finance Management Act number 14 of 2020, the Inland Revenue Act number 1 of 1989, the VAT Act number 7 of 2012, and the Banking Act number 10 of 2014. Within these pieces of legislation, reference is made to the disposal of records. However, there is no mention of the transfer of records to the National Archives. Over the years, conscientious and right-thinking civil servants who understand the importance of record keeping, including the preservation of records with archival value, have been sending records to the National Archives on a regular basis. Although some ministries and departments keep their records and have established their own so-called record center/archives. Yet ironically, when records are needed by these same public servants in the performance of their duties, the National Archives is their first port of call in search of those nebulous records, which in many instances were never sent to the National Archives. There is no comprehensive records management program. program for the management of government records. There is the attitude among some civil servants that records belong to the creating ministry or department, and the approach to managing and maintaining these records usually depends on the space availability, how knowledgeable senior management is about records and record keeping, and the relationship that ministry or department has forged with the National Archives. Some ministries and departments send a constant flow of records to the National Archives, including the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Communication, Works and Infrastructure, the Physical Planning Department, Survey and Mapping Department, Registry of Civil Status, and the Registry of the High Court, among others. Since records are not regarded as a government resource or asset to some people, through the years, individuals have destroyed records with little or no consequence. For example, after the 1979 elections, the individual who was rewarded with the post of Principal Information Officer committed one of the most egregious acts by attempting to burn all the photos and other records he could lay hands on pertaining to the John Compton period. His thinking was that he wanted to erase John Compton's legacy from the island's history. By the time a senior staff member found out his intentions and what he was actually doing, a large portion had already gone up in smoke. The two men nearly ended up in a fist fight. The senior officer salvaged what he could and protected them until he personally passed them on years later to the National Archives. The Mabia Valley development is another case in point. This project, parastatal, was burned to the ground when allegations of malfeasance in the management of the parastatal was broadcasted. In other instances, boxes of records were taken to secluded locations and burnt prior to general elections. In fact, when this occurred in 2006, I wrote a front-page article decrying this practice for the Star newspaper. Quote, any organization or individual that is involved in the provision of access to records and archives, whether to internal or external clients, needs to operate within a framework of standards. Managing Archives by Caroline Williams. These standards must be developed along internationally accepted lines, and herein lies the problem. With little knowledge of records management, public servants have no qualms in passing on records to unauthorized individuals. However, one would have thought that since it is mandatory for public servants to affirm or swear to an oath of secrecy prior to confirmation in post, this would prohibit such actions. There is a piecemeal approach to record keeping as government ministries and departments operate in silos. A comprehensive records management program would help to alleviate the problems with records which exist at present with regards to the misuse of government records. A proper records management system would be able to track the individuals who access and use specific records. The National Archives should play an integral role in the decision-making process with regard to public sector records management, e-government, and attendant legislation pertaining to these areas. If these are implemented, the placing of government records within the public domain would be minimized and eventually eliminated, and good governance would prevail. Consequently, the 25-year rule for opening government records to the public as mandated in the National Archives Act would be upheld. If freedom of information and privacy laws were legislated, these would be enforced. ISO 15489 Records Management Standard, which was gazetted by the Bureau of Standards as the record-keeping standard for use in St. Lucia, would be understood and implemented. By faith, we at the National Archives persevere in anticipation of that time.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. I did not get a chance to introduce you, so I'll take that opportunity now. So Margaret Thomas was appointed the National Archivist of St. Lucia in 1992. And since that time, she has built the National Archives into a model institution for small states using the total records concept. She's a qualified teacher. Mrs. Thomas holds a Bachelor of Arts in English with History and Educational Psychology, and also a Master of Arts in Archives Administration and Records Management from University College London. Mrs. Thomas has written several books focusing on St. Lucia's history and several articles to the newspapers. In June 2008, she was among 20 individuals inducted into the National Heroes Gallery for Students and presented the Eagle Award for Professional and Excellence in Records Management and Archiving. In 2014, she was awarded the St. Lucia Medal of Merit for her contribution to archiving. Since 2016, she has been immersed in her passion for art, with her forte being portraiture. On the 18th of May, 2021, Mrs. Thomas was recognized for her contribution to history, education, and culture by the National Reparations Committee, together with 31 other women. So right now, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our presenters, Ms. Black and Mrs. Thomas, for challenging us to look at what is the value of records? How do we value records? How does our organizations value records? And what can we do to change the concept of seeing records as just being paper that we can throw away as we feel when we require additional space? So at this time, we're going to be opening our question and answer segment. You're being asked to indicate by using the raise hand icon on your screen. And from there, you will be enabled to either chat or to ask your question directly. So at this moment, I open the floor. We have no questions, no comments.
There are some hands raised. Would you like me to share the names for you?
Yes, please. I don't see it.
Margaret Stamp has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Margaret. You may ask your question.
Margaret Stamp. If not, the next person is Mijan Morgan. Mijan Morgan.
Hi, morning. Morning to the panel, morning to everyone else present on the symposium. I just had a concern because some of my team is just getting the opportunity to come online. Would you be able to tell us if the recording would be available for further, information sharing among ourselves and our organizations later on? Sorry, you're speaking, but I'm not. You're muted.
Yes, the recording will be provided at a later time.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Next hand is LJ.
Hi, good morning to all the panelists. My question is, how do you get your organization to understand the importance of records keeping, and how do you get them to support the RIM policy on a whole?
Ms. Black, would you like to take that question for us?
Sure. LJ, thank you for that question. That's something that we have been pondering for quite a while. And I believe some of us have had some success, but it seems as if we put 1 foot forward and 2 feet back. So how do we get senior management attention? And one of the questions I asked was, is it that we are not marketing ourselves sufficiently? The other thing that would have come out of the presentation is, are we quantifying what we do? So part of what we need to do is to understand what is important in our organization. Look at within your organization to identify whether the records are part of your core business or it's a supporting function like HR or finance, and to see that what it means to the organization, and in some way use that information to impress that these records must be cared for in a certain way. Another thing is to use the standard as a driver, the International Records Management Standard. We really don't want to use tragedies and when things go wrong, but we that's a last resort. But when this happens, we don't want to beat people over the head, but we want to say, okay, let us try not to have this happen again. And this is how good records management can help. So these are some little things and quickly that I think we can do to bring attention to the fact that records must be cared for properly.
Thank you, Ms. Black. We have someone, Spencer.
Good morning.
Go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning, panelists. Good morning, everyone. This is Vicky Stevenson from Montserrat, and we would just like to know how long do we keep data? How long do we keep records for data?
Ms. Black?
Okay. Again, this is one of the questions that keeps recurring. Now, it is not a one-off answer. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You need to understand the importance of the records. You need to understand the value to the business, operation, and administration in the organization. You need to know what other values it may have, like legal, historical, evidential, informational, and at the point where we agree based on thorough analysis that a record series would have exhausted all values, then that is the time that we would assign to different record series. Now, this is something that, I could speak the entire day on, but you asked the question and the easy answer is that there is no one-off. So some people say 7 years. No. Each record series has to be analyzed based on the business value and the value to the wider society. And therefore, we would then come to an agreement. A records committee will give perspectives of the users, the legal community, the financial sector within the organization, administration, and so on. And then you will have done your due diligence and have what would be suitable for your organization.
And to thank you, Ms. Black, and to add to answer those questions, those two questions that would have asked earlier in terms of implementing. I'm Tricia Lawrence Powell, the Director of User Services of the National Library of Jamaica. To implement your records management program, and also to add what Ms. Black would have mentioned, would require us to take records management as a project undertaking. And this will mean scoping it fully and to identify your intended objectives or goals. In terms of understanding how to value your record, the presenters would have indicated how to treat with your records and to consider it as an asset. And because it is an asset, same way like how you would have thought about a furniture, for example, and what the furniture brings to your entity, what it is that records and information does for your entity. And having understood that value, you'll realize if you use root cause analysis, that those records, that information asset that you have, will have far greater impact than the piece of furniture that you classify as an asset, being that it becomes the root cause for your decision making. It becomes the root cause for your audit findings implementation. It becomes that piece of evidence that determines whether you win a legislative court case or not. So the asset that you have is going to be important. Or you value it, it means that it is time, that committee that Ms. Black spoke of, to sit down and form what is called your information asset inventory. It allows you to list what those records are in your entity, where they are located, which piece of legislation would have an impact. For example, if it has personal information, then you'll say, all right, data privacy law comes into play. If it has anything to do with customer complaint and your relationship with the bank, then you may say that the Banking Services Act is coming to play. If it has something to do with startup business, then it may mean that the Companies Act legislation come into play. And then you craft all of that in your information asset inventory, identify the risk to the business, and from there, you'll be able to determine how long that record lasts. Is it that your organization feel that it may not have that much consequence, but when you look at how it moves from one agency or department or ministry and move up the continuum, it has greater impact, and therefore you can determine whether or not, oh, this piece of document needs to be permanent. Is it that when you look at the FAA legislation and it says if it is in print versus if it is in electronic, and then you look again and say, oh, did Barack Obama send this invoice into us? And therefore it has an historical present. That appraisal system will allow you now to determine and put into that information asset inventory that this document under normal circumstances, it would have been 10 years, but because who sent it or who it relates to, it becomes a permanent piece, and then it taps into our history and heritage. Once you move it into our history and heritage, then now you are able to value that record, because it could mean that you join with the Ministry of Tourism and then it becomes something to brag and blog about. So, like Miss Black, you can determine the value of your record. It means that you need to sit with that committee, assess the record, look at the legislative framework, look at the decision-making process within your entity, and then come to a determination. It is important that every piece of information asset that we have is valued. It must be valued so that we have a comprehensive information asset inventory, and so that we can create the solutions that we want to propel the records management where it ought to be.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Powell. I hope that answers your question. We will take 2 other questions and then we will move on. James Robertson.
Thank you. I'm also fascinated with these questions, but I'm also thinking, I'm a professor of history at Mona, and I'm the Jamaica Historical Society's representative on the National Archives Committee in Jamaica. I do wonder if it's worth thinking of longer term readers as well as the immediate readers. These are public records, or the ones that are public records and generated in the public service, are not just for the short-term use of the public service, though of course they are, but they're also part of the long-term record of the nation and the societies that comprise that nation. And while there's a case that can be made for showing things like an Obama obituary or an Obama signature in the short term, there's also a long-term case. And this may be 50 years, and now we've got a lot of the questions of identity privacy. It might be worth closing it for a century, but that doesn't mean that it should be thrown out because it's got to be kept for a century. It does mean it may be difficult to factor in to business-like factors and business criteria for saving records. But if you actually want to get a record of the past, at some stage, the national records really are going to be useful. And it's worth thinking of a long-term record and a long-term memory that may be beyond the lifespan of the current electorate, because then it can be revealed. So I'd like to think about more than just immediate use, but also long-term use. And then finally, for Ms. Black's fun paper, it may be worth thinking for business records and business criteria to look towards ships or planes and think about what's the value of the lifeboat or what's the value of the parachute when you're working out the calculations for the use of material. And archives might be needed to be thought of as sort of long-term assets, like the tire jack in the boot, as well as short-term utilities as well. But they're fascinating papers, and I found them interesting.
Thank you for those comments, Professor Robertson. We're going to be moving on to our second session, so I'm going to requesting that all the additional questions be forwarded to Ms. Christelle Scott, at the Government Records Center. So you can type them and she will respond, or another records analyst will respond to those questions. This has been a very intriguing time, and I do hope that it has been engaging for you as it has been for me. At this time, I will turn over. We'll be having a dance piece at this time, which will be followed by our second session, which will be led by Mrs. Cole Phoenix. Thank you so much.
Thank you and welcome to session 2. We have in this section 2 presenters, Sparkle Ferreira and Mr. Emerson Bryan. Sparkle Ferreira will be speaking to us on the topic, Fail to Plan, Plan to Fail, strategic tips for identifying risk for records and information management in government agencies. Let me share with you now her profile. Sparkle Ferreira holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in History, a Master's of Philosophy in Cultural Studies, and is currently pursuing her PhD. She's a PhD candidate in Information Studies at the University of the West Indies. Ms. Ferreira has worked in the field of records management for over 15 years with experience in the financial and postal sectors. She's responsible for the creation of several records management policies and procedures. And most importantly, she's a functional lead in the design and implementation of the new electronic records management solution at her organization. Ladies and gentlemen, I will return to introduce Mr. Brian. However, at this time, we will have Sparkle Ferreira. Please note, make a note of your questions, and we will be using the raised hand feature to take your questions at the appropriate time. Over to you, Ms. Ferreira.
Good morning. This is Sparkle Ferreira presenting Fail to Plan, Plan to Fail, strategic tips for identifying risk for RIM in government ministries and agencies. And what I present, I'll be using 3 case studies out of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll use these to discuss what we can and can't do, or what we should and shouldn't do to improve records and information management in our government and ministries. Firstly, we want to identify the inherent risks that impact government and agencies. Consider this impact and discuss strategic tips for the identification of risk. Finally, we would like to consider ways to mitigate inherent risk through the implementation of a robust records management program. Firstly, we have one incident that occurred with the THA. For those who know, the THA is, of course, the oldest political institution in Trinidad and Tobago, formed in 1768. It is led by a chief secretary and consists of 10 divisions, ranging from, of course, the Office of the Chief Secretary, Education, Innovation, Energy, to Tourism, Culture, and Transportation, to name a few. In 2014, the THA would have gone before the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament for review of its Auditor General's report. The inquiry, of course, was brought up live on TV and online, and the committee found several inconsistencies. Now, what would have happened? They did not present several years' reports, financial reports, and other reports that were requested of them. And when they went before the committee, they admitted that they had challenges, 3 of which stemmed within records, which would have been, of course, the availability of trained staff. Significant improvements were needed in the record keeping, which came out of the findings of the committee. And of course, the accountability of upper management was lacking. And as I said, all 3 of these would have been admitted to by the representative on that team. Another incident that happened would have been at WASA, the Water and Sewage Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, formed in 1965. The act of the time would have brought together several different agencies. Now, WASA is a very interesting one, because if anybody is following what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago, they are going through a transformation at the moment, which may or may have something to do with the next slide. All right. So in 2015, a decision was taken to commence a forensic audit. So December 2015. A couple of weeks later, about 2-3 weeks later, there was a fire at WASA head office. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. It was believed that health and safety communications were affected, but amongst those as well records. One report says it was archival records. I heard another one say customer information, another one said EHR. WASA's management said, don't worry about it, there's an electronic filing system. I really do hope so. But this event didn't only gain local attention, but it gained international attention, regional attention as well. Twitter was on point and ready for it at the time. We went viral. There was also Global Voices, an international multilingual volunteer community of writers and activists, and they would have picked up on this event. And January, around the time of the fire, they would have also been pushing it online. There was another one, National Commission for Self-Help. There was an investigation over claims of over $200,000 in material between 2005 and 2009 would have been purchased, no records, of course, of same. The minister, of course, would have been asking the CEO, clamoring, trying to find out what happened, $250,000 in claims coming out of it, vendors saying that they had verbal agreements, no documented proof of purchases. Where was the accountability? Who is responsible? So coming out of these, we have some issues. Inadequate and non-existent policies and procedures are clear. There appears to be inadequate or non-existent legislation, and I can confirm that at this time there is no legislation for records management in Trinidad and Tobago. We have legislation for like the Exchequer Act, Finance, that does speak in some degree to retention and record keeping, but it's specifically to government financial records, HR records, payroll records. But there is no general records management legislation or guideline per se for Trinidad and Tobago. Then there's, of course, the issue of lack of knowledgeable staff, and we saw this with CHA, and as I said, they would have admitted to this in their interview with the Public Accounts Committee. And as we will discuss later on, this is one of those that we need to help improve within the region, because of course, as we know, many persons in records would have come into the field, not through training, not through university, but through seniority and just through work experience. There's of course a lack of accountability. Nobody wants to be held responsible. Nobody wants to be held accountable. When you ask the question, there is no one in charge. No one knows. Everybody's blaming the next person. Lack of accountability. Management go down. Poor infrastructure for the proper storage of records. When I think of WASP, I wonder, was there fire suppression units? Was there any security on the doors? Who had access to the floor? Who had access to the building? Who had access to the room? How did the fire get into the room? Was the infrastructure built in support of a records environment? Or, as is mostly the case, the building was never built for records. They may have decided we needed a record space and decided to knock up some walls, put some shelving, and this is the record center. Things to consider. Then, of course, record keeping systems that exist are not influenced or do not meet best practice standards, and we will discuss this in a little while, because I think that this is a very important point for us in the Caribbean to take consideration of. What would have been the impact, though, of what occurred in these three instances? Embarrassment to staff and the organization. WASA, for example, when someone says that, I work in WASA, that's a big deal because you get them paid. You work in WASA. Yeah. In Trinidad, if somebody says they work in WASA, they say they have a good work. But then when something like this happens, it's an embarrassment. Because everybody now will say, no, they have less corruption down there, boy. Embarrassment, only business in the street. Lack of confidence, people will not trust you, people will not have confidence in you. And the thing about it is that they will not just say, well, the employees are okay, they didn't do anything wrong, it's WASA. Once they work in WASA unity, right? Self-help is supposed to be community-based. When you have an incident like this, the question, of course, where it says, can we trust you? Can we have confidence in the work that you're required to do, that the government gave you to do, that you're responsible for? Low productivity. If you can't find it, report. THA, nothing is getting done. We have problems. Inadequate reporting, THA, they cannot produce reports for 5 to 9 years, 10 years later. Audit still not complete. Loss of records and information. If it is not in order, if you cannot find it, it's misfiled, it probably no longer exists. If you don't have the necessary procedures, people can shred and get rid of things if they don't have a routine or regular disposition process in place. No accountability, high cost and lead to loss of funding, loss of jobs, lead to business closures. It is cheaper to set things up from the upfront, put your systems in place, electronic systems, shelving, filing. It is important to put those things in up front so that you don't have the higher cost at the end, especially if a litigation matter were to come up. Never seek your importance through standards of the world, know your way. It is easy to implement the standards set by others I mentioned, and I read circulars, best practice standards. What does that mean? Oftentimes we think NARA, North American example, rate USA. We think ISO, we think DOD. We look to Australia, we look to Canada, we look to the US, we look to other countries to tell us how we should manage our records, to tell us what we should do, to tell us how we should live. I am not at all saying to disregard the standards that were established internationally. But how about taking the standards, reviewing the standards, and developing your own standards? How about looking at it and saying, listen, this is what I'm required to do. Let's see what is done outside. Let's see what we can take from it, and then build on it and be proactive and develop our own standards here. Why can't we have international standards that were developed by the Caribbean? Why can't we have local and regional standards developed for us Caribbean people? Why can't governments develop their own standards based on the laws of the land, as opposed to leaning heavily on international standards? How to do that? How to ensure that they can develop standards that are special and relevant to your organization, Check the pulse of what's going on locally, regionally, internationally. See what's happening in the region, see what's happening in the world. Use it to inform. Don't just take it, slap on your photograph and say it's yours, but use it to inform what you are doing. It can be part of your foundation. It is, however, more important to check the pulse of what's happening in your own ministry, agency, or company. What are the needs of the organization? As I will say later on, get to know your strategic plan, get to know where the company is going, get to know what the vision is. Post-COVID, is it digitization? Are they still pushing paper? What is the plan? And build yourself around it to make sure you're relevant and to make sure you remain relevant and that your systems are also relevant. What are the unique standards that need to be implemented to work in tandem with the strategic plans of the organization? Take your time, ask the right questions, do your surveys, check the pulse, keep on top of it. So some strategic tips for consideration and identifying risks and recommendations. As I said before, develop industry-specific standards. Do not be afraid to step out of the box and create your own. The cultural, political, economic, and physical environment is different in the Caribbean and in the third world. Conduct routine audits of your request program. Check to make sure that it's still working. Use the ARMA core competencies. It's a really good document, I find, in my opinion. And I think it is something that you can use as a foundation for what you're doing. And if you use it and you keep doing routine audits, you determine the year, the 2 years, however you determine it's best for your organization, how you work. But it allows you to make sure that you remain relevant, that you know whether or not your systems are working. Check your pulse. Conduct a needs analysis. Records is not about you alone, it's an organization-wide strategy. We are support. Check in with your clients, check in with your record staff. Don't leave them out of the process. Ensure that the existing systems are not only effective, but are still relevant, that they are working. Conduct annual reviews. Don't just stick the policy in a first drawer on your desk or in a cabinet somewhere and forget about it. You need to make sure and check. Just like I said before, check to make sure it's still working and it's still relevant. Make sure that it's up to date with what's happening locally, regionally, internationally. Make sure that it's still aligned with the strategic direction of the organization. If it is not, it's time for change, it's time for revision. Expose your staff to training. As I said before, many persons may have come into this quite accidentally. Many persons, yes, they go to university and get a degree, but a degree might be kind of old, no offense. They need to learn and keep up to date what's happening in the market, what's happening in the region, what's happening in the field, educate and expose your staff to the relevant training. Hire knowledgeable and skilled staff. I know it's hard. I know it's hard and I know it's difficult. But hire them, find them, and when you get them, hold on to them. Pay them what their just due may be. Give them opportunities to help them grow. Allow them to represent the organization. Trust them. Conduct routine awareness sessions. This is not a one-man show. Let the organization know what's happening. Let the organization into what you're doing. Update them routinely. Get them involved in the records process. The records process is not just a record center process. The records process is a ministry and a governmental process. Finally, what can we do differently? If we have to consider the three scenarios I presented at the start, and the risks and the impact of those risks that I mentioned before, the first thing we need to consider is to get to know the various functions within your ministry intimately. Build a system of support. One must understand internal operations in order to do that. By understanding how others work, we can implement record-keeping systems that will be of benefit to them. Never neglect the need for accountability and monitoring of same for international standards. Break down silos. Government ministries should never operate in complete isolation from the other. There should be one policy designed for the entire government across all ministries, with the exception, dare I say, of health, which is a different kind of file and different kind of record altogether. Standards and guidelines should be adapted to the specific needs of each ministry. For example, one electronic system can be acquired for use by these ministries, and then individual procedures should be developed for same. This was just an example of a checklist I found that I thought would be beneficial for you. Please don't slap on your coat of arms and say, let me use it wholesale. But I thought it was something, to just make sure and check something to create internally for your own ministry or agency, to make sure that you have everything in place and to keep tabs of what you're doing and to help manage your system and manage the development of your program a lot better. Thank you very much. I hope that you found this presentation interesting, and I look forward to all questions and comments. Thanks again. Have a blessed day. Bye.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ferreira. And I'm sure if we were in a physical space, everyone would just be applauding and making a lot of noise because we were able to identify with many of the things you spoke about. If it's not time for change, it is time for revision. A powerful point, and many others that I'm sure you made note of. I noticed that when I looked in the attendance list, I'm not seeing many hands going up. It looks like you don't have the questions ready yet. Please be prepared for same. Right now, we will be moving to hear from our next presenter, Emerson Bryan. Mr. Bryan, I will be asking you to unmute, turn your video on, and get ready to make your presentation, sir. Emerson Bryan has a Master's of Science degree in Information Management. He's a certified archivist and records analyst with over 20 years experience in the field of archives, records, and information. Ladies and gentlemen, he had conducted a research, and the title of his published work is The Impact of Information Change in Caribbean Public Sector Reform, a look at Barbados, Jamaica, and St. Lucia. Help me at this time, ladies and gentlemen, to invite to share with us Emerson Bryan, looking at the topic, records and information management as a fillip to knowledge management through the DIKW model. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Mr. Bryan, over to you, sir.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for your very great introduction. Just a small note in terms of correction. I'm actually doing the SECU model, which is socialization, externalization, commonization, and internalization of information for knowledge management. So I'm speaking about two topics that are very close to my heart. I've been an information management practitioner, as mentioned in my bio. My last previous role was in knowledge management, which is still an evolving field in terms of having the level of embeddedment as we have in archives and records management. So it's still a very novel area. So there are many definitions in terms of what knowledge management is. It's typically used to define an arrangement, management arrangement, where we have a range of practices, tools, concepts, and so forth to manage what we call informational assets, right? Part of the information assets that most organizations possess would include those assets that are codified, meaning that they are put into a structure. So they're not unstructured, as we tend to define those types of digital information assets that are in like a database, for example, or that will be in an attachment to an email and so forth. They are codified, which means that they are put under an arrangement. So a knowledge management architecture also requires what we call knowledge culture, which will also require some amount of sharing. So it supports collaboration, it supports dissemination, and it also supports the development of best practices, typically in an explicit format. So there are numerous definitions, as I've mentioned, but they tend to be aligned to the IT field, but they are legitimately within the information management field that, you know, I would argue, because it's not so much about the technology, but you still need people to do all of these things, to organize, to manage. You're trying to organize informational assets so that they can be utilized. So if we go to the next slide. I'm sorry, are you seeing my screen, or are you seeing the presentation? Oh,
not yet.
Okay, I don't, maybe perhaps if I get control, I could share my screen. I could do that. Okay, so that we don't lose time, I'll just continue. So the information, the knowledge management systems that we currently would be interested in would be those information assets that would support for greater information management, information sharing, that would allow for some contribution in terms of evidence towards decision-making processes. So essentially, for every knowledge management arrangement that you have in place, you have people, processes, technological support, and a process that they need to adhere to. So people need to be aware of the different methodologies, policy arrangements, all the different information or technological solutions that are available within knowledge management organization. And of course, people need to be retrained because you're asking them to do things in a different, you're trying to adopt a new approach in terms of how you manage information, right? So people need to be retrained. People need to go through a process of change. So they need to be able to navigate the new knowledge management environment. But the challenge is that most knowledge, and we speak about knowledge, is resident mainly in your headspace. So it's between two ears. And Peter Drucker made this, he acknowledged that, you can't truly manage knowledge as it really is, unless you have a means of capturing that knowledge. So there needs to be some kind of codification, some kind of capture. And typically this is done by, by adapting, methodologies that are really in the remit of information management. So you're talking about trying to access the tacit knowledge. I think it's right. So it's the slide just after this one. Right. Actually, 2 slides. Right, the next one. Right, thank you. So the tacit knowledge, this is what you know, right? So it's what's resident in your headspace. So how do you tap into that? So you need to have a process of retrieving or capturing that tacit knowledge. So you can administer, for example, an interview that will be recorded, or you can administer some kind of survey instrument, some kind of means of capturing that tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is typically what somebody would represent in a document. So it might be a monologue, it might be in a report, it might be from an expert's based, piece of research or something like that. So it's to ensure that those types of knowledge are properly managed. So tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge can be managed, but for our conversation here today, we're looking at explicit knowledge. So technology can be used to support the capturing of this type of information, and technology can be used to manage this type of explicit information as well. There are many platforms that we can think of. We have, for example, collaborative tools that we can access, such as SharePoint. We have email, we have our mobile devices, we have numerous means of trying to manage this explicit information. So it's not just the technology that would be the means to managing this this explicit information. It's also very important that the information assets, as we're calling them, our knowledge assets, would be in a format that can be decoded, so that they can be manipulated, so that they can be managed. So it's very important that when we think about knowledge management, but from an information management perspective, that we appreciate all of these things. So what about information management? Information management is really about having a process, a management process around data that's been processed. It needs to be distilled. So it needs to be put through some kind of process, whether it's through providing the results from an analysis or the feedback from an instrument that's been administered. That information needs to be managed. So it's very important that people have an appreciation towards the information assets, and not so much about the technologies concerned around the information assets, because in records management, we adopt what we call a media neutral approach in terms of managing information assets. And I just want to say that a lot of people have been using information management interchangeably with records management. Really, the way I see it is that records management is a sub-discipline of information management, because under information management, there are many other disciplines as well, sub-disciplines such as information security management, data architect, database administrator, and so forth. So it's very important that you keep all of these things in mind. I think it's the next slide after. So for my presentation, I deliberately said records and information management because I wanted that flexibility where I could expand the scope to be more inclusive in terms of the avenues, in terms of methodologies and so forth, for trying to match the knowledge management requirements. So it's very important to keep in mind that when we're talking about information management with respect to a KM type scenario, we're talking about information know-how and how those information know-how can be managed in an explicit format along some kind of structured arrangement. Do you mind moving 2 slides forward, please? Right. So now this takes us to the second model. And this is a model that was advocated as, and it's been one of the standard features of knowledge management for a while now. And it was advanced by Nonoka and Takichi, sorry, right? So the first of the 4 components of the second model is socialization. It's tacit to tacit exchange. So a good example would be, for example, cooking rice and peas. These are things that we come up and we see others, doing. We see a methodology being used. We just assimilate that. We observe, right? So we observe the methodologies and we try and replicate what we see. So we basically try to put in place some kind of practice. There is no documentation. There's no explicit resource that you can access. So it's tacit to tacit exchange happening there. Externalization, on the other hand, will be basically having access to some kind of resource, some kind of explicit arrangement, some kind of articulated policy, for example, being the main source of authority in terms of doing things. So in this instance, this is where an information asset might be one of the sources in terms of knowledge assets that will be recognized within the SECI model. The combination approach is basically having explicit to explicit exchanges happening, meaning, for example, an exchange such as sharing a document, right, with a colleague that in turn might generate a third document or a secondary document. This is where we have explicit to explicit exchanges happening. So a piece of research, for example, might be based on, if it's a desk-bound research, might be an explicit to explicit type of exchange ongoing. And it also would include as well some amount of capturing of tacit knowledge, I should mention, because again, going back to the research scenario, you can administer an instrument to capture that tacit information. The internalization is basically having the knowledge asset supporting some behavior that would be resident on practice being adopted, right? So we have, for example, where that research might then inform a community of practice or a means under which there can be some established agreement that this is how we do a particular process, for example. So the exchange would be basically taking on board the knowledge asset that's been codified, that's been put in some type of taxonomy, and then allowing for that codified information asset to then support some kind of standardized practice. The next slide will show you exactly the graphical representation of the SECI model. And just to note that it goes out in a spiral. And as you can see, it starts off from the socialization component, then down to externalization, and then from externalization, combination, and then full internalization of the knowledge management processes. I'm not sure if you're seeing the slide deck on the screen, but one thing to bear in mind is that the way in which we work today is dramatically different from how we used to work perhaps even 10 years ago. Back in the old civil service, or what we before the The new public management applications were introduced in most of our working spaces, including in Jamaica. Back in the 90s, for example, when the administrative reform process had just started, you usually would be dependent on print to paper policies. So there was very little in terms of having access to emails. For example, I remember I joined the service back in 1997, and we still had the registries which were, basically almost 100% paper-based driven. Very limited examples I can recall of having a hybrid system, except maybe at the Ministry of Finance that will have a financial management information system, and the former Ministry of the Public Service that will have a human resource management system, for example. There were very limited applications in terms of having hybrid systems. People with PCs on their desks, they were typically not even connected to the internet, and it was dial-up at the time, if you can recall. So that was almost like punishment. So move forward now to our current realities. So we have true knowledge workers, or the public service worker 2.0, where most records are created and stored digitally. In fact, there are some information assets that are native digital. And as the minister mentioned in the opening remarks, moving towards a COVID-19 type of operational environment would require very limited contact with the public. And so there are some processes that have been automated. So there's a system of reengineering that would have happened. All of that should be built on evidence. And then what is evidence management? Predominantly the realm of records management. So we can look at, for example, the heterogeneous platforms that we use on a daily basis. We have access to our emails, our documents, records, and so forth on various platforms. We have it on our PDA, on our laptop, on our tablet, and so forth, right? In the cloud. And we also have those highly secure records, digital records that are on premise, and that we need to ensure that there's some system in terms of information security management when it comes on to those information assets that need to be still managed in paper-based format, that there's some chain of custody arrangement being observed. And of course, we have the dilemma right now with respect to supporting a collaborative environment where we have, for example, the output from this intervention, the training, that training needs to be codified and then registered into the formal records management system for it to have that knowledge management application. Other than that, it gets lost because it's not registered in the formal records management system. All right. So those are some of the applications that we need to bear in mind when we speak about information management or records and information management supporting knowledge management. So one of the key methodologies that we need to bear in mind when we talk about managing any kind of information that will be put for some high-level strategic purpose is to deploy an information governance program. And the information governance program should be built around, for example, what we call an ATIP card approach, which means that there must be some accountability, meaning that since you're looking at introducing frameworks in place that can be trusted, you're looking at a trusted environment, that there has to be some kind of accountability. So somebody needs to be responsible for the records management program, right? There needs to be some kind of integrity, demonstrable integrity at that, meaning that there should be some kind of program in place where it's not a one-man band that decides to get rid of information assets, but a committee, a collective of stakeholders, key stakeholders in the steering records management steering committee that will sign off on the destruction of information assets. And there needs to be a process of certification and so forth, right? There needs to be some kind of compliance, right? So the compliance framework will be based on statutes, will be based on policies and so forth, that basically would be the authority instruments that would support the destruction and retention of information assets. There needs to be transparency, meaning that there should be a written policy in place with defined norms and expectations that everybody should be aware of, from orientation, from the very first day of onboarding. And then there should be a reference document that you can go to right throughout your employment in terms of knowing what to expect in terms of the records management program. And of course, ensuring that there is accessibility through time. So right now we're managing information assets that are native digital, We recall, for example, old DBase 4 records, Lotus 123 records, Coral Word, right? All of those records were very important records at the time. We don't know what formats might be in place moving forward. The pace at which technology is moving is so fast. And the IT industry is not so invested in terms of the information assets themselves, but they're interested in selling hardware and software. Most of our computing equipment nowadays don't come with the standard devices and features that we recall used to be available maybe even 5-6 years ago. CD-ROM drives. How many remember the 5.25 floppy disks, right? 3.5 disk drives and all of those things. We were so excited when the speed at the time. So we don't know what types of information assets or what types of hardware we need to bear in mind. But some of the things that we also have to bear in mind as well when it comes on to the knowledge management features would be, for example, the communities of practice. A community of practice would need to have access to expert information. Their contact information also need to be managed. So we're debating right now key statutes that concern privacy. So we have a privacy bill now in Jamaica being debated in the House that deals with people's personal information. So if you're looking at gathering information in an expert's database, for example, you need to have a policy in place in terms of the retirement or the retention of those personal data, right? We're talking about common repositories. Who has access to what? What are the rights that you're going to be assigning? And is there some kind of common understanding in terms of the taxonomy that you're going to be using to organize the information assets? Performance management. Normally, if you're doing any kind of evaluation and monitoring, you want to make sure that there is a means of measuring. And if you're talking about measuring, there needs to be some kind of validation in terms of providing evidence. So that evidence needs to be qualified, needs to be trusted. So it needs to possess all the characteristics of the record. It needs to be complete, accurate, trustworthy, right? And through time. If you're looking at a learning management system, you need to be able to tap into information that at least would have gone through some kind of processing. So there is an expectation that if you're talking about learning management systems, that you're looking at peer-reviewed information, for example, that there's some arrangement in place for evidence to be managed. So research information. Is there a process around how research information should be managed in terms of who gets access to what, how that should be retired, and so forth? And version control, of course. Collaboration. How do you share information that is privileged? You're talking about government information or information that is highly sensitive. Do you have protocols in place, for example, when you're outside of the office and the email client is down? Do you send email using your personal email? All of those things are the realm of records management, even though it's been applied in the knowledge management type of scenario. And of course, information security management, where we have to ensure that there's some kind of encryption, some kind of safeguard being put in place in terms of information classification. We don't do information security classification typically because it wasn't something that was really handed down to us, except in very limited applications, the Foreign Service being a good example. I recall, in foreign affairs and, HR departments where confidential means something that was standardized across the government of Jamaica. But what does restricted mean on those types of markets? We need to have a system in place in terms of releasing information, right? And people need to have an understanding about what it means when a restricted document has been circulated, when it ought not to be circulated. And the best way of doing this in terms of ensuring compliance is to throw somebody under the bus. You need to crucify somebody. I'm sorry for the choice of words, but people need to be aware that you're serious in terms of applying penalties. And oftentimes the records management policies and programs do not have enough teeth. But I'm very grateful that the government of Jamaica's records management policy has been very, properly structured in terms of, highlighting the penalties that will be in place for information mishandling, right? So we just need to bear in mind that these are all the remit of records management, even though it's a knowledge management type of environment. Strategic information management would be the encapsulation of all of these things, where if you think about knowledge management, you're really thinking about strategic information management, because your knowledge management framework should be built upon a high level functionality. So your strategic plan needs to be an alignment in terms of your strategic plan, your mandates, your work plans, etc. There needs to be some kind of correlation to your records management program to ensure that you're observing an information governance program that supports functions-based classification, for example, right? I know that I probably went over the time, and so I rest, and I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brian. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Session 2 has really been a mouthful. Now, everyone, we are really strapped for time, and I can facilitate 2 questions. Already I'm seeing one hand up. Marcia Vassell had her hand up. Marcia, would you like to unmute right now and share your question? Marcia Vassell?
I'm sorry, I had my hand up. It was an accident.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that. We have Mijan Morgan. You may go ahead.
Hi, morning again, everyone.
Morning.
Mr. Brian, always a fun time listening to you. Enjoy your presentations. I'm hoping that the slide deck will be made available to us, because we weren't really seeing throughout most of the presentation, the references being made. And also, there are some very good points in there, especially about the technologies we use to circulate information within our circles, management circles, and so on, and how we monitor and really keep track of what we are sharing internally, and also what to do when things get shared outside that bubble. So I'd like to bring some of my team up to par with what you mentioned today, because I'm in agreement with a lot of it, and I'm sure my other colleagues online would share the same sentiments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I saw earlier SCJ Holding, or is there one other person who would like to ask a question before I close this session? Okay, there being none other, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Brian, and also to thank our first presenter, that was Sparkle Ferreira, for the mouthful. I want to tell you, I have learned so much, and I've been reminded about a few things that I know I need to pause and ensure that they are in place for my organization, and hopefully all the other government and private sector organizations that are on will look to do same. Thank you again to all the participants and all the presenters. And right now I would like to return the lectern back to the moderator. Have a good rest of the morning. Enjoy. That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Redemption songs. So we're having a nice, wonderful session today, right, guys? So we would have looked at all the challenges, all the issues, all the concerns. And as Mr. Cargill would have mentioned earlier, what are some of the solutions we are coming to bring to the table? So we want now to close off this session, and of course, redemption song, because freedom it shall be, where our records and information practitioners can go into their organizations after this session and really embed the knowledge that they would have gained today, so that we can certainly have the redemption that we seek to ensure that that information asset is governed according to principles. So one of those principles that we are going to be discussing today, well, not me, Mr. Tim McGill, is applying the GAR principle. And most of us will know about the GAR principle. But we are now looking at it from the electronic records management standpoint, and of course looking at the Omni Suite, and Mr. McGill is going to do the demonstration. So I am very, very pleased after hearing about COVID and information asset and not being daunted, strategic plan, project, people, process. We are now moving into profit, because that is what we are going to get from our records and information governance. So Tim McGill is the President and Managing Director of Global Business Development. He has over 35 years experience in sales and marketing, and maintain a strong commitment to using technology as a tool for improving business intelligence. Mr. McGill also has over 20 years experience in enterprise resource planning, document management, document publishing, and workflow development solution. I am very piqued right now, because I'm sure most of us want to embed the solutions that will drive the level of efficiency. So I'm just going to, with no strap for time, I'm moving straight over to Mr. McGill. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Tied in with the PowerPoint illustrations that I provided previously, I'm going to introduce everyone to on a brief demo to our platform, which is Salem One. Salem One is a completely web-based enterprise content management / document management platform. It's a hybrid between the two, and we focus on a variety of different areas in supporting it, which we'll walk through. Part of the benefits of the application itself is the fact that it's also written in HTML5, CSS3, which means it form factors to any device. So you can access information on this platform from a mobile device, from a tablet, from a PC, a Mac, whatever. As long as you have access to a web browser, you can certainly have access to the platform itself. In the platform, we have a number of different key areas that we're going to walk through. We'll focus on the document management and the video encoding side as the key elements in this brief demonstration. But we start off with when you walk into or launch into the application. This is a very secure structure. We can employ two-factor authentication as an example on login from anyone. And the application itself can be hosted on a private cloud or a public cloud. So by that, we have police services as an example that host the entire application within their own internal network. And we have others that are using hosting agents like Microsoft Azure or AWS. Azure actually has just launched a new stack in Jamaica, as well as one in Cayman and Bermuda, and is going to a number of other islands in the Caribbean that we're supporting. The application, when you launch and you come in, you get a main screen area, which gives you the ability, all these widgets are all customizable. So you have access to linking to multiple calendars, obviously a news feed, and any documents. Down the left-hand side, you've got the ability to basically go through and you have a dashboard. The dashboard is my personal area for access to personal information. So this system gives us the ability to have access to your own documents, your own data, in an area that's completely segregated from an area for the rest of your company or agency. All of that data can be stored in the groups area. And you can think of each group as a separate hard drive or a separate network drive, or in fact, it could be a completely separate department within a government agency. Now, when we access into these, and I'm just going to go into one to basically go through some of the illustration of it, you will see here that the folders themselves for the documentation that's in here looks very similar to, say, Windows Explorer as an example. The reason for the different colors between these folders and the other ones is all of the blue folders are completely locked down and are not accessible to the outside. The beige folders here are exposed to the internet and give you the ability to basically link them up to external folders. So if you had wanted to manage documentation in a specific folder that could be broadcast to, say, a public website for information for the public as a whole to access from, then that can be managed in here from there. All of the folders are extremely secure, and the security is down to the granular level with respect to documentation. So I can grant read-only access to specific documentation, read-write to others, and even put it to the point where the actual original documents can't even be viewed by a person who can read the read-only access to them. From within here, the documentation area and all of these folders, you can see down at the bottom of this folder, and this is consistent with all of the folders. Basically, you've got access for something called WebDAV. WebDAV gives us the ability to create links in high-speed scanners and multifunction printers and take the information. So you create a button on the scanner, you stick the information in the scanner, and it will scan it directly into a specific folder. The other area that we've got in here is a unique email address, and this is provided for each and every folder. So every time we generate a new folder, a new unique address for WebDAV and a new unique address for email are created. The next point I wanted to note on this is the request notification on this. The system has a complete workflow development tool in it, which gives us the ability to generate what we call notifications and confirmations. So you can have situations where if somebody makes a change in the document, checks it back in, the other people that are authors on the document can be notified automatically. So any changes to a folder can be tracked and monitored by the people who have subscribed to basically have that tracking. From within this area here, we also have what's called scanning documents area. This is an area where you can scan directly. So for high-speed scanning, and you've got a scanning administrator who basically sits here, takes a look at the specific documents. They can access a specific document or set of documents, and they can access a folder that they want to access that to. They can then add metadata to that specific folder if they want and go through. And we've got all of it, date, timestamp, drop downs, anything can all be created in the metadata format in here. You will also note in here, this one is listed as required. If I hit OK on this right now with nothing in there, it won't allow me to save the document without the invoice number being added in. Now, I'm just going to add this in here, and then we can file the document. So that gives the ability to basically go through and manage all of those. Now, from the Scan Administrator folder or any of these folders, for example, basically as the documents are brought into the system, the entire document goes through a stemming, indexing, and OCR process, which allows us to naturally search the entire content of every document that we ingest. We also have the capabilities to index images. So if someone was scanning documentation as, say, a TIFF file or a JPEG or a bitmap. Those can all be properly indexed in the structure and can all be rendered searchable as well. Same goes for images that are embedded in documents such as Word, Excel, PowerPoint, whatever. So it gives us a lot of flexibility on that side, and it also reduces the amount of metadata that is required to make content searchable. This was certainly an advantage for us when we instituted the platform in a government agencies in Bermuda, where they have what's called the PADI legislation, or public access to information. Where, as an example, someone could walk into the Bermuda Police Department and request all the information they've got on it. Because of the natural search and the content here, the police have the capabilities to basically access all of the documentation that's available. They can then go through, compile all that documentation, and basically have a PADI officer review it to see if there's a need for redaction. Going through some of the functionality that's in here, I'll go into one of the folders. We have the ability to basically create documents from templates. So I can go in and I could select a specific document if I wanted. I can create a name for that specific document and hit create, and it renames the document to that specific name, and it will launch the template. Now that template could be a blank document. It could be a specific template such as this template, and they can all be edited in the system directly through this. So I'll just add this in and then close that off. So you can see how the document is stored in here, and we can access it from there. The next point is you can also create unique URLs, and you can store the URLs in here. So in a favorites list, you can create new folders. Now, one of the advantages of this is we have the capabilities in the system to limit the ability of anyone being able to create folders. And the reason I say that is because when we went into one of our clients, they had a problem with people creating folders and storing documents in different areas. The other point was all of the folders lacked a lot of structure. The naming conventions of subfolders within folders was not the same. So we automated the process where when you go and, let's say, with an incident management platform, you generate a file, that specific file generates a file name, and then Salem One basically creates the folder and all the specific subfolders where everything needs to be filed. When you create new folders in here, one of the other areas in doing that is the ability to apply retention policies automatically to the folders upon creation. And these can be virtually any type of retention policy. But there's some that I've listed in here as examples of this, but we have the capabilities to edit that and basically make changes associated with that. Tied to that, when you add something in like a retention policy, the workflow automation tool that's in the system gives us the ability to basically have notifications and confirmations on a retention policy, and you can have electronic sign off on that. So you could have multiple approval processes associated with the approval of a disposal of a specific document, the authorship of a document, the publishing of a document, the list goes on. Search properties in here for documents. This is for the metadata, and you can search definitely for many number of the different search requirements in here. We also have the ability through the folder administration to basically go through and define document properties. Again, you've got key metadata that's in here. I can go through and create any number of metadata options and create new metadata quite easily. I can make it a global property. I can establish a default value for it. So if you had admin, HR, finance as an example, and let's say the bulk of the documents goes to HR, then you default to human resources as the default in the drop down and adjust others to speed up the time and try to reduce or eliminate as much any mundane tasks that maybe exist. We also have the ability to do bulk import from within here. The system has the capabilities from a document importing. I can do bulk import. I can zip up multiple copies of files with all the folders and subfolders into one big zip file, and I can bring that into the system. It will restore all of the folders and subfolders. It will automatically put all of the documents through the indexing process so that they're all rendered naturally searchable. Now, in keeping with that, and we're going into this, I'll give you a bit of an example on the search side. So we saw the metadata side. Now we take a look at the search side. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to search on So from within here, basically it searched in 0.13 seconds, found 75 documents and is displaying 50 of the 75. And it's displaying two types of the documents. One is the core document itself. The second is what's called a web doc. So as the documents go through the indexing and OCR process when they're brought in, we take a copy of the original document and we publish it in HTML. And the reason for doing that is that HTML is 1/100th or less of the size of a standard document. So this gives us the ability to basically link multiple HTML web doc versions together and publish them as what's called a virtual book or a virtual file. This has given us the ability to basically deploy those and share them on minimal bandwidth and open them on minimal bandwidth. And again, that was one of the key requirements. I know in Bermuda was they have areas of the island where it's only 3G accessibility, and they wanted to be able to access documentation and view them from a police vehicle in some of the outer areas of the island. In here, we've also got table of contents, so you can go through. And so this indexes the entire header, footer, structure of the documentation and renders everything searchable with regards to it. We also have the ability from within here to share this document, provided I've given the ability to do so. And you can share the source file, which could be a Word document, an Excel file, a PowerPoint, or just a web doc, or both. I can set a specific date and time for that on there, and then select the emails that I'm going to send it to. And that email could be individuals or it could be distribution lists. There's a wide variety of options that can be done from there. Okay, I'm going to go back in here for a second. From within the documentation itself and tied in with the whole records management area, I'm going to go into a couple of different documents that we've got. In this document here as an example, you can go through and you can certainly see all the version history, all the previous versions of the document. These are all date and time stamped. If I suddenly discovered there was an error in the current one that is exposed, I could click with a click of a button, bring this back to an earlier version. I can track all the version notes and generate reports on that. We can also have what's called the notifications and confirmations on this, and you can see how this can track whether I've confirmed it or not, which can allow corrective action to happen. We also have web doc confirmations on this, so if a document gets published and is sent out to a number of key people, so let's say it's a policy and procedure manual or a health and safety document that people need to get notified on, you can track whether they've been notified and they've actually opened it and read it or not, and take corrective action associated with that. There's an entire audit trail associated with the documents, and it's very granular in going through that. So I'll just go through and I'll show you where we can create documents, but essentially you can go through here and it will literally track when it unlocks a document, make a change to it, and publishes it as a new version. And all of this is all date and time stamped, who did it, when they did it, the likes of. Now to do that, I've got the capabilities in the system. And again, this is a demo environment, so we've got a wide variety of things in here. but you can actually edit the documents within a word processor that's embedded directly in the web browser within the application. We also have capabilities to edit the document directly in Word. So I could go in and basically add comment that I wanted to it. And you can go and hit save, and you can see down the bottom here, it's actually saving the document directly. I can then close that, and you'll see when the screen refreshes. Oh, it's on the next one. And here, there we go, 1.52. So that's in there. Now, final point that I wanted to note on this with regards to the document is the whole ability to revoke shares. So the ability to publish the shares as an HTML link and send them out securely. You have the ability to open them. You have the ability to search them and the likes of, but I also have the ability to recall them and basically revoke the share. This is very different from the traditional email someone a PDF and then how do you recall it? The reality is you can't. With this, we have the ability to stop that connection immediately and sever the whole thing. I think that's final point. I guess we'll quickly do on this and go from there. Is the ability to create virtual books from those published documents. So I'll go through and I'll go in here, or actually, I'm going to go back to here. And I wanted to show you this. So take a look at all these documents and the size of the documents that's in here. So this one's 127 megs. This one's 106 megs in the normal PDF size. Clearly, these documents would not be emailed to anyone given their file size. But as HTML documents, they certainly can be bundled together and done that. The interesting thing I wanted to show you here too as well is you take a look at this document and the quality of it. It's an old manual that was actually originally scanned in as a JPEG. And you take a look at the quality of it. I mean, even the spline off the cover was actually cut off. Now, you take a look at the document in here, all the structure associated with that document is maintained and everything is completely searchable. So it's done a pretty amazing job, I think, in combining that. Now, if we want, we can combine multiple documents in these file sizes together. And create what we call a virtual book. And I will go down here and just say, okay, create a virtual book. And I've added these in. I'll actually add a couple of aircraft manuals to it as well, just to increase the file size even more and provide a copy of something that everybody can review, and Jard can certainly circulate amongst everyone. So again, just like a table of contents, I can line up the key documents that I've linked together for publishing. I can hit save, and there's the document with all the different manuals. And so, and then the nice thing from here, like I said, is I can share this. I can put in an expiry date on it. And Ms. Thomas, here you go. So I just sent out a published virtual book that can be shared with everyone. That's basically, I guess, the key elements that I wanted to demonstrate in this structure. I had put a virtual or a video together that everyone can have a look at. And I hope you enjoy it. Any questions, certainly feel free to forward them on, and I'll be happy to validate with anyone. Thank you.
Wow, Mr. McGill, that was indeed a mouthful, handful, all full. I am certainly excited about what that software is able to provide to us. The information governance opportunity is certainly something that is quite was awesomely presented, and I am sure it would have piqued the interest of many of our participants today. We also have another solution to bring to the fore, which Maxine Elliott, the Director of Health and Information Technology, she'll be presenting to you OmniSystems. After that, Ms. Thomas will come to do the closing remarks. Oh no, we have a musical interlude.
Good morning. My name is Maxine Elliott. I'm the Director of Health Information Technology at OmniSystems. On behalf of our President, Ian Tomlinson, and our Chief Operating Officer, Reginald Vigilant, I would like to say thank you to the JARD team, their leader, Mrs. Claudette Thomas, and the Government of Jamaica for extending to OmniSystems this opportunity to participate in such a timely event. OmniSystems was founded in 1993 by two Caribbean systems engineers, namely Ian Tomlinson and Reginald Vigilant. And for over 28 years, our founders have modelled excellence in leadership, providing an array of ICT, software development and digital transformation services to governments, private sector and commercial customers, achieving along the way notable awards and recognitions as a minority-owned business. The driving vision of our organisation is a commitment to turn our customers' ideas into reality. But you may ask, how do we turn ideas into reality? The Government of Jamaica has a commitment to the idea of complete digital transformation of all government records, processes and systems. OmniSystems has a reputable track record of making that very idea a reality. We successfully completed full modernisation and digitisation of the registry system for the Federal Aviation Administration. This project included digitising the data management operations of two branches within the registry, the Airman Certification Branch and the Aircraft Registration Branch. Both of these branches have statutory responsibilities for processing and maintaining critical official records concerning all US certified airmen. That includes pilots, flight and ground instructors and aviation maintenance technicians, along with the US registered civil aircraft fleet. Through our successful digitisation of the FAA's records management systems, our customers' idea of completing and implementing a strategic response to projected major increases in workload became their reality. OmniSystems helped the registry absorb this expanded workload by providing examiners and other users with advanced, productivity-enhancing, secure digital capabilities and tools. The process enhancements included digitisation of basic manual document recording, storage and retrieval processes, plus faster and better interagency communication of data on all airmen and all aircraft. While we are headquartered in McLean, Virginia, USA, we have remained truly committed to focus our expertise and success in the Caribbean as a leading ICT and software development organization. And we have offices located in St. Thomas, US Virgin Islands, Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, and right here in sunny Jamaica. This commitment is further evidenced by our contributions to local education, training, workforce development, and charitable sponsorships right here in the Caribbean community. We offer the very best technologies, services, and subject matter experts for digital transformation in the following areas: cybersecurity, records and document management, health information technology, public safety and security, case management, debt and grants management, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Our success is partly attributed to our team-oriented business model of choice and our organizational culture. Another one of our driving success factors is our customer-centric approach. We are technology agnostic and focus more on allowing the voice of our customers to remain our priority. We are a diverse organization with strong roots and an ever-expanding footprint in the Caribbean region. We are actively involved in the Jamaican diaspora movement along with other Caribbean islands, and this knowledge and lineage allows us to adjust to the unique needs, challenges, and realities that our customers face right here in Jamaica. We are competitively scalable, meaning there are very few vendors globally that are willing and able to customize their solutions, providing the right team of experts, the right solution delivered in the right time at the right cost. We take great pride and effort in building and maintaining long-term relationships with our customers, ensuring every solution we offer is sustainable with our help over time. This morning, after many meetings and discussions to understand the records management and digital transformation goals of the Jamaican government, we have selected the right partner with the right solution, backed by our team of certified engineers and subject matter experts, to provide this presentation for you and a demo of a cost-effective, state-of-the-art solution that can be implemented at the speed of business to ensure full compliance with GARP principles for all Jamaican government ministries, departments, and agencies. It is therefore with great pleasure that I turn this presentation over to our team member and long-standing product partner, Mr. Tim McGill, who will also provide that short demonstration on behalf of Omni Systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine, for the introduction. The focus today in the initial PowerPoint deck and later in the demonstration is going to be focusing on how records management, we have applied GARP principles to the structure of it while ensuring user adoption and a user-friendly environment. The first 2 points in the PowerPoint deck that we'll be providing you, we've provided some background on Omni Systems. This is a supplement to what Maxine had previously introduced with regards to it. The second area is with regards to Salem One and some brief background on us as well. Team OmniVision's mission statement. So the main organizational focus: efficient, consistent, and resilient corporate operations delivered by empowered staff through digitization of business data and workflows. The mission of the project: to leverage innovation, both for internal and external customer service through well-designed, easy-to-use electronic workflows, rapid electronic access to consistent, high-quality data following GARP framework through the entire life cycle of those documents as well. So the current state of many firms, basically, over-reliance on hard copy files is still far too common. Terabytes of unstructured data, also common. No workflow process to support efficiencies beyond emailing documents between different parties to basically get approvals. Information loss due to manual practices. High costs of office supplies, paper, files, printers, ink cartridges, all have significant costs. Security risks and disaster recovery limitations. In a future state, through Team Omni, the focus is going to be on paper-light offices with reliance on electronic documentation and data, controlled document capture, version control, and naming convention.
Well, 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 well. Wasn't that an exciting feast? We spent a lot of time since morning having various discourses, and I know, based on our last set of presentations, which looked at the opportunities, the solutions coming from Mr. McGill and from Miss Elliott, that we now have something more to chew on and to look at possibilities. Now I can tell you, we have received our document from Mr. McGill, and we are also going to be sharing all the PowerPoints with those of you who are here. I'd like to say a very special thanks. Thanks to the Honorable Favour Williams, our Minister, the Minister of Education, Youth and Information, for giving us that keynote address. She challenged us to start thinking about solutions, possibilities. And following her, we had our moderator, Mr. Dwayne Cargill, who started us to open our minds, look at what we may want to consider as a way forward. Because this presentation is just a little touch of the dialogue we hope to continue. So I'd like to say thanks to all our presenters, Sonia Black, our Jamaican rep, Marga Thomas, representing those members from St. Lucia, Sparkle Ferreira from Trinidad, Emerson, even though he's a Jamaican, he has adopted Barbados, Tim McGill and Maxine Elliott from Canada. We want to say thanks also to our moderators. I spoke about Mr. Cargill earlier, but we have had Mrs. Strawn, Mrs. Raquel Strawn in a rarity, Odine Cole Phoenix, and Trisha Lawrence Powell. We thank all these individuals who kept us on cue, on target, and listening and facilitating question and answers. Now, this event would not have been the success it is. It would not have been without having the support of the Office of the Cabinet, and it is the Public Sector Transformation and Modernization Unit, the Library and Information Association of Jamaica, the Government Records and Information Management Network, GRIM, and that is coming out of the National Library's Jamaica National Information System, HEART, Planning Institute of Jamaica, and the Caribbean Regional Branch of the International Council of Archives, for short, CARBICA. To the RIM Committee, the Records and Information Management Month Committee, you have really done yourself well. I'd like to also recognize our interpreters. Don't you think they did very well, considering the technicality of the dialogue which was presented? Mavita Chin, Nikita Shaw. I thank you all because you have brought the theme to reality. Our theme, managing records and information for posterity. Transparent, accountable, and inclusive. And we have demonstrated that inclusivity because those on our platform who have hearing impairment are able to participate and be a part of the dialogue. So our entertainment pieces coming from Mr. Wilson, Michael Wilson, and K-Law Dance Company. Now, we would not have been able to have this broadcast being shared across the globe. So the Jamaica Information Service Production team, you have done yourself well. I really ask for you a round of applause. Then the Ministry of Education, they did us well. They gave us support. I am considering, say, the Information Division, the Communication Unit, the ICT Unit, because without ICT, Information Communication Technology Unit, giving us that support so that we could have a full feed, nobody falling off our platform, we would not have accomplished. And guess who? The JARD team, man. Those who initiated this idea, those of you who sat and planned late in the night, you were up early in the morning, those supporting our participants on the various platforms, we want to thank you. And as we go, we're going to consider the various thoughts, the strategic plan, information governance. We're looking at all the areas, digital functioning in this new normal, the digital environment. We now need to move, not that we're going to forget the manual, but we are moving into a new dispensation. How we protect privacy, look at people's information, how it's managed. I'd like to say thanks to all of you and have a very wonderful day.